Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Whatever time you may be joining us today, we're so happy you're here. Although we can't spend time with you in person this year, it gives us joy to know that we can continue to connect and recharge about books with such passionate and caring librarians. My name is Lizette Serrano, and I have the honor of hosting our event today and introducing our incredible lineup of authors and artists. The common thread bringing these great works of art together today is empowering young voices. Through the combination of words and pictures, readers will flex their reading muscles, discovering self-worth and exhibiting wonderful ways to share our common humanity. Given the times, I think we all can agree that more important than ever, we need to offer encouragement, hope, and inspiration to help parents and educators validate young children. We need to remind them that they too matter. And celebrated poet, teacher, mother, and brilliant author Tami Charles is bringing us this necessary picture book titled All Because You Matter. The poetic lyrical text is part love letter, part anthem to Black and brown children everywhere, which reassures them that their worth is never diminished, no matter the circumstance. To make this picture book a match made in heaven, All Because You Matter is illustrated by Caldecott and CSK award-winning artist Bryan Collier. His brilliantly crafted approach is deeply influenced by his family and ancestors. His art empowers readers to feel pride, joy, and comfort, reminding them of their roots and giving them the strength for the days to come. Next, I'm so excited to roll out the Scholastic welcome mat for two maestros of picture book biographies, Barbara Kerley and Edwin Fotheringham. Their picture book collaborations have received numerous acclaim and have been recognized by the Cybert and Boston Globe Hornbook Committees. Among others, their books, What to Do About Alice and The Extraordinary Mark Twain, are used in classrooms and libraries across the country. Eleanor Makes Her Mark, How Eleanor Roosevelt Reached Out, Spoke Up, and Changed the World, is their fifth picture book, fully baked creation. This book shines light on the extraordinary ways in which Eleanor Roosevelt worked tirelessly for change and justice. The back matter includes a wonderful assortment of archival photographs and activities, which prompts readers to ask themselves, how will you leave your mark to change the world? I'm thrilled to introduce two brand new collaborators who are about to embark on making their own mark in the world. Varian Johnson is the author of several novels for children, including The Great Green Heist and To Catch a Cheat. His next novel, The Park Inheritance, changed the game, presenting a powerful look at our history, infused with humor and mystery. The novel soared to new heights with 4-star reviews, multiple awards, including the Chris Scott King Honor Book Award. Another drum roll for Shannon Wright, who is a super talented illustrator and cartoonist, and we are thrilled she's joined the graphics list. She illustrated her first picture book, My Mommy Medicine by Edwin Fotheringham, and her follow-up, I'm Gonna Push Through by Jasmine Wright. And during the summer, Shannon also co-teaches a comics course at Virginia University. Varian and Shannon have teamed up to deliver a delightful coming-of-age story about identical twins, Maureen and Francine Carter, who start growing apart in middle school, and offers much representation to the contemporary graphic novel genre. Now, I'm going to pass the mic to Tami Charles.
Thank you so much, Lizette. I am super honored to be here. I can't believe it. This is great. So if I may show, this is All Because You Matter. And this is the book of my heart. I'd like to talk a little bit about the process of how this book came to be. And honestly, this book came to me in a dream, which I think most writers would say every time we have a dream about a book and we wake up, the dream is gone, all the words are gone. But this particular book wasn't the case for me. I dreamt of every single word from start to finish, and the words came to me almost like a lullaby, which told me that I needed to write this book as a poem. But in addition to the words that came to me, it was the art that I saw in my dream. And when I woke up, I knew that the artist for this book was destined to be the one and only Bryan Collier. I knew that he could bring my inspiration to life. So speaking of my inspiration, what brought me to write this book? Honestly, it was the moment I became a mom. I have a 10-year-old son. His name is Christopher. Actually, that's him on the cover. He's so excited that he gets to be in a book. But I became a mom 10 years ago, and I remember feeling this strong urge to protect him and to shield him from just everything bad. And as he grew older, as he entered school, he started to ask me questions. And these questions would stem from discussions that he would have in class. It may have stemmed from things that he would see on television or online. And most importantly, conversations that he would overhear. My son is very nosy, just like most children. But these questions that he would have, they were real questions. Questions about Dr. King and why was he assassinated. He learned who Tami Rice was, and he had lots of questions about that. And the mom in me, I wanted to keep him innocent forever. I did not want to answer these questions. I did not want to have these conversations about the injustices that were going on in communities of color and against marginalized people. But I knew that as he got older, these questions would only get worse. He would only have more and more questions. So for me, time was up. I knew that I needed to find a way, a gentle way, to put in words all of the feelings that I had bottled up for much of his life. I knew I needed a way to get the words out. And he was still too young to read certain stories in the young adult space. I knew I had to write him a picture book, which led me to my purpose. My purpose for All Because You Matter, I would say that it is twofold. At its heart, this is a love letter to my son, my beautiful brown-eyed, I love the way Bryan captures his eyes. It's just spot on. My beautiful son, Christopher, is special. He's a special boy. He is multifaceted. He's talented. He's athletic. He's all of these great things wrapped into one kid. But he's not the only kid that's like that. So I knew that this was the type of book that, in addition to it being a love letter to my child, it would be a love letter to all children, to remind them of all the ways that they matter and why they're so special to us as parents and caregivers. But I also knew that my purpose for this book was to use it as a conversation starter, really for anyone who deals with children, parents, teachers, librarians, caregivers. I want this book to serve as a way to begin to start those talks, to begin those difficult questions that children will have, most certainly. Something that tells them about all the good things in the world, but the not so good things too. And that kind of leads me to the wish that I have for this particular book. Now, all authors wish, that their books will get in everyone's hands. Of course, I want this book to be in everyone's hands. But my wish is that families will take the time to have those uncomfortable conversations, yet necessary conversations with their children, especially today, particularly today, as injustices continue. This is not the time to be silent. This is the time for us to all come together and remind our children our most special gifts of all the ways that they matter. But on top of that, it's really important that we all come together and serve as allies. We need to be active examples of what respect looks like. I think we need to continue to show children their self-worth and just continuously remind them of the greatness that they have inside and continuously remind them of all the moments that matter. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Bryan. And Bryan, I can't thank you enough for doing the art of this book. I will never, ever, ever forget your kindness and your gift. Thank you so much, Bryan.
Hi, my name is Bryan Collier, and I'm the illustrator of All Because You Matter, written by Tami Charles. Special shout out to the Scholastic family that are promoting and telling this story all over the world and globally. And thank you for all your support as well. Now, this book is about a mother's and a family's anticipation and excitement around the birth of their new child and the journey their son will take once he arrives. And in this text, the author, Tami Charles, expresses a universal message of hope and love and dream that she has for her son that hasn't arrived yet into this world. And she notes that your ancestors fought hard and they made a special place just for you, all because you matter. And with a cautionary tone inside of it, she notes that there's a possibility that there'll be days that you'll be treated unfairly. There'll be moments when you're totally misunderstood, but don't worry, because you do know that you matter. What a wonderful message that she's putting out into the world. This book is a celebration to all children everywhere, especially Black and brown boys and their parents and educators. And All Because You Matter is a great way to have conversation about what's happening in our world around us. What happens to the idea of a kid being bullied or the brutalization of marginalized people and the abuse. This is a great conversation that you can have and use this book as an entree to this very important topic. Now, All Because You Matter is painted in watercolor and collage. And then as the illustrator, what I did is I started with a single petal shape and I built a background with just these shapes shaped like petals. And you can see that in the end papers when you first open the book of the nighttime starry sky. They start off with petals and I build upon it and then layer upon layer and layers. As the story unfolds, you get a chance to see these petals that transform into faces and voices of our ancestors. They change form as they build wallpaper, images and rugs and backgrounds for this particular story. And these voices are like cheerleaders for the boy, making space for his importance and responsibility. There's a page where the boy is full frontal with his eyes closed and there are stripes across his face. The stripes represent the oceans and rivers that connect us all, that connect us to our past and our ancestors. And there's another page that you turn where the boy's eyes are wide open. And remember those petal shapes? Well, in the background, the petals are faces and colors and textures and voices of the ancestor cheering this boy on, reassuring him that you truly matter. That's his awakening. And then the next page, it goes on to a full family of hands holding these petals in a nighttime sky in the background. Well, that's the responsibility that we have to us. It's a universal theme. We're all responsible for each other. If we all matter, then we all need to help one another. And that thread goes throughout this particular text that was so powerful. As we go on into the text, it kept moving me and jarring me in so many different ways as a father, as a husband, and our children that we're bringing into the world. And how can we shore them up so they'll be tough enough and wise enough to encounter whatever they're going to be encountering in the world, and we be there to support them. That is so important. Now, when we get to the end of the book, this was the mind-blowing part for me. It's an image of a family in the middle, and there's a circle of community, of love that encompasses this family. They're all holding hands, and this one family, even the boy, is in the middle. And I said, wait a minute. We read this book to our child, but it can't stop there. No one will be let off the hook. At a certain point in time, that child, that young person has to read this book back to their parents or their teacher or their guardian or their librarian. And they have to look them right in the eye and say, mother and father, or teacher, or librarian, all because you matter, I'm here. ... It doesn't let anybody off the hook. It's a circle. It's not a straight line. This is a circle that's being built, that's unbroken, and it goes around and around and around. And that's the power of all because you matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Tami and Bryan. That was truly beautiful and powerful. Thank you for your words and your pictures. And now hand it off to Barbara Kerley.
Hi, thanks so much, Lizette. Hi, Ed and I are so excited to be here sharing the true story of a pioneering First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. From the time she was a little girl, Eleanor found her greatest joy in helping others. With her family, she fed children who lived on the streets. She visited patients in the hospital, and she helped families in one of the poorest neighborhoods in New York City. Through these experiences, she met people who were suffering, and her compassion and empathy grew. As she got older, Eleanor dreamed of finding a way to leave her mark upon the world. Luckily, in 1899, she was sent to Allenswood, an all-girls school in London, England. For Eleanor, this is when her real education began. The school was run by an extraordinary teacher, Marie Souvestre. She encouraged her students to challenge their assumptions. She had the audacity to believe that women could think for themselves. Her views on human rights inspired Eleanor's desire to work for social justice. Eleanor was born into a wealthy family, the kind of family where young ladies become debutantes and enter society. When she left Allenswood and returned home to New York, she could have spent her time and energy going to fancy parties. But Eleanor bucked convention and found her own voice. She wanted to do more. She joined a group investigating the working conditions of women in garment factories, and she taught calisthenics to girls who lived in the tenement neighborhoods of New York City. Soon Eleanor married Franklin Roosevelt, her fifth cousin once removed. When he became a state senator, Eleanor reached out to the community to hear their concerns. When Franklin became governor of New York, Eleanor was his partner in the work, inspecting prisons, asylums, and hospitals to check on the welfare of the people living there. In 1933, Franklin became president of the United States. It was a very difficult period, the Great Depression. Millions of people were out of work, schools were closed, and many families had lost their homes. Eleanor's role as a pioneering First Lady began. Many previous First Ladies had seen the role as being a hostess at official functions. And Eleanor did hold many gatherings at the White House. She often hosted tea parties in which hundreds of people would attend. But Eleanor wanted to do more. Government, she believed, should serve the good of the people. She wanted to get out to know all Americans all over the country. She was determined to learn about their lives and find out how she and Franklin could help them. Eleanor encouraged people to write to her to share their struggles, hopes, and fears. She often received hundreds of letters a day, and she and her assistant tried to read every one. She also invited important people to the White House to hear their concerns, especially people she wanted Franklin to meet. Women working for equal rights, students working for a better future, and African Americans working to end discrimination. Other First Ladies had been, as the New York Times put it, officially mute. But not Eleanor. She began speaking out on the need for equal rights and equal opportunities for all. To reach out to even more Americans, Eleanor hit the road. In her first year as First Lady, she traveled 40,000 miles. She flew or took a train, or sometimes drove herself in her blue Buick. She went to schools, housing projects, hospitals, and jails. She even took the mine train 2 miles underground to watch 400 miners dig coal. She wanted to better understand the lives of all Americans, and by showing up, she showed that she cared. Eleanor shared what she learned on her trips with Franklin and with the American people. Through lectures and radio broadcasts, and especially through her wildly popular newspaper column, she built empathy. She convinced many Americans that, despite their own hardships, they must look out for others as well. Throughout the book, illustrator Edwin Fotheringham captures Eleanor's energy, sense of purpose, and her deep commitment to connecting to others. And this illustration was key to how he developed the art for the book.
Hi, my name's Ed Fotheringham, and I'm the illustrator of Eleanor Makes Her Mark. And as Lizette said, this is the 5th collaboration between Bob Collier and myself, and I'd like to thank Bob for putting up with me all these years. So I often try to coalesce a picture book by using a visual metaphor throughout, sort of like a ribbon tying all the pages together. In this book, I've used the metaphor of cut paper figures throughout the book, which is a metaphor for the connectedness that Eleanor Roosevelt was always trying to find and facilitate. So in this spread that I'm showing, there's a map of the United States, and in that map, in the background is a whole bunch of figures holding hands, all connected. So this idea of cut paper figures came from a very early draft, and our editor, Tracy Mack, saw it in a very small illustration of the same spread that involved a conversation between Eleanor and FDR at the dinner table. And I used the map of the United States much like a voice bubble with the cut paper figures inside, expressing her conversation with FDR about her travels across the United States. And Tracy saw this as a thread that could be visually used to show this idea of connectedness that was expressed in the manuscript. I played with other themes in early drafts as well. There was a lot of mention of letters being sent and correspondence. I tried carrier pigeons, but those didn't make the cut. I also drew a lot of violets because those were mentioned in the text as well. Those did make the cut as the main color of Eleanor's coats throughout the manuscript, and also in other spreads, like her dorm room being filled with violets. But it was the cut paper figures that took our editor's attention. And I think the reason for that is that they are a visual metaphor that's not explicitly stated in the manuscript, but it expresses an idea that is stated throughout the manuscript, though, as I said, not explicitly. So that's the sort of thing that we try to do with illustration and words, is to sometimes have them mimic, but sometimes have them express a secondary idea. I've also utilized the connected figures in non-cut paper versions as well. For example, in the opening White House scene, the staff is seen as all holding hands, with Eleanor running between them, connecting them. Also, Eleanor's classmates, when they are consoling her when she's leaving Allenswood, are all holding hands. So this just continues. Also, in the telephone cord that connects Eleanor and FDR in a distant conversation just before his passing, the telephone cord is much like the cut paper figures, a connection device. And also there are some surprising cut paper elements that aren't cut paper, such as in the scene in New York where they're meeting the constituents of New York City. The shadows of those constituents are shown as cut paper figures. So tying together a manuscript using an implied visual metaphor, to me, it adds a conversational dimension between the written word and the illustrated components of the book. And that makes for a more interesting book than just reflecting the manuscript directly. And that's what I've tried to do. Thank you.
Eleanor's efforts to reach out and take care of others didn't end with the Great Depression. She was still First Lady when World War II began. She traveled to military hospitals all over the South Pacific. As she stopped by every bed, shaking hands with the wounded, she felt herself rebel against the horrible waste of war, and she returned home more determined than ever to help build a peaceful world. Eleanor did this brilliantly in the work she did after she left the White House. In 1946, she began serving as a United States representative at the United Nations General Assembly, an organization founded to foster peace. There she chaired the committee that created the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, a statement that championed the dignity and equality of all people. Eleanor spent her life taking care of others. In difficult times, she offered help and hope, reminding us that we are all stronger when we take care of each other. Ed and I hope you'll be inspired by Eleanor Makes Her Mark, how Eleanor Roosevelt reached out, spoke up, and changed the world.
Thank you, Barb and Ed. It's so great seeing the two of you together again. And now on to Varian and Shannon.
Hi, I'm Varian Johnson, the author of the graphic novel Twins.
And I'm Shannon Wright, the illustrator of Twins. And we're so excited to be published by Scholastic and share our debut graphic novel with the world.
Twins is about twins. Growing up, twin sisters Maureen and Francine were always a pair. They shared all the same classes and activities, and they even dressed alike. And Maureen, the younger of the two, loved it. Then comes middle school and everything changes. Francine starts dressing differently. She joins new clubs, goes by a shortened name, Fran. And worst of all, Maureen and her sister are placed in separate classes. Maureen thinks that it's a mistake, some computer fluke that created their different schedules. But then she discovers that it's not a mistake, that it's not a fluke. Her sister asked for them to be separated. So I've written a number of books, including The Parker Inheritance and The Great Green Heist, but I don't think I've ever written anything quite as autobiographical as Twins. You see, just like Maureen and Francine, I'm a twin, 5 minutes younger than my identical twin brother. And like the girls in the book, my brother and I shared all the same classes and activities until middle school. The book was also inspired by other things, other people, particularly these two stinkers right here. These are my daughters. My kiddos, especially my oldest, loves graphic novels. She devours them, or more like inhales them. It actually irks me a little bit how quickly she reads them. I'm like, kid, do you know how long it took to make that book? How about slow down? But all joking aside, graphic novels are what transformed my daughter from a reluctant reader into a voracious reader. However, as much as she loves graphic novels, we struggle to find comics that featured Black girls like her. We struggle to find graphic novels where she could see herself on the page. And this is how Twins morphed from being a book for me into being a book for all readers. Black kids deserve to see themselves as the stars of the story. And it's just as important for other readers to see Black kids as the main characters as the stars of the story as well. Paraphrasing Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors, and hopefully Twins will be able to serve readers in all of these ways. As I said before, I really resonated with Maureen, the younger of the twins. She's bookish and introverted, very much like me when I was younger. And like Maureen, I struggled with how to become my own individual, unique self when my brother and I were put in separate classes in middle school. And fun fact, like Maureen, I was placed, against my wishes, in Junior Air Force ROTC, which is similar to the Youth Cadet Corps class in Twins. So for anyone out there who's thinking about writing a graphic novel, let me warn you now, it's a whole new way of thinking. As a novelist, when I'm thinking about pacing, I'm often weighing the length of each chapter, paragraph, and even each sentence. But with a graphic novel, I found that I also had to think about pacing in terms of the number of panels per page, and in some cases, even the size of the panels. I had to think about page turns, how to maximize the strength of the illustrations, while also minimizing the dialogue and narration. I even had to think about character placement, staging, basically, who's sitting next to who. I had to consider what action is happening on the page when the character is giving narration. Trust me, guys, none of this is easy. But also, I discovered that working on a graphic novel was more of a partnership, certainly more so than any of my previous novels. Sure, it was my job to come up with the script, but I didn't write it in a vacuum. In addition to my editors, Shannon reviewed the script at each stage. And her comments weren't limited to just the art. Shannon and I talked through dialogue and characterization, really all parts of the book. You really got to trust your partner if you want to create something special. Also, my editors and I felt that it was important to not only create a book with Black characters, but to have a co-creator who is Black as well. And we are really committed to diversity and inclusion. We must make sure that all aspects of our work are diverse. Not just the characters on the page, but also the people behind the book. Plus, I needed a partner who got what it meant to be a Black girl. Someone who understood that Black kids come in all shades and shapes and sizes. Someone who understood all the wonderful ways in which we can style our hair. Someone who understood Black families and Black love. And with that, I'm thrilled to hand things back off to Shannon Wright, the illustrator and my partner on Twins.
Thank you, Varian. As it was mentioned earlier, Varian and I partnered up on Twins to create something so special and something really genuine. And it was important that the diversity not only came to form on page, but also behind the scenes too. So when it came to creating Maureen and Francine, it felt so natural because in them, I saw myself. I saw my cousins, I saw my nieces, I saw my nephews. I was looking in that mirror and actually seeing my younger self for the first time in comics, which I know, wild. And specifically in Francine, I saw myself. I saw a lot of myself in both physical appearance and personality. She's outgoing, super involved, but also very subconscious of herself and also her abilities. So when initially designing the girls, I wanted to make sure that their individual personalities really shine through. Despite them being identical twins, because at the end of the day, like Varian mentioned, they're very much their own person. They're not interchangeable. They're very unique. Much like everyone, they're unique. I took reference from my own life and all the Black kids that I've interacted with, but I also took reference from real life, from Black siblings who are identical, but again, still very much their own person. But it didn't stop there. Varian and I worked really closely together to create a world for all of these characters, and believe me, you're going to see a lot of characters to exist in, that included their families and friends, their community. You have Nikki, we have Tasha, we have Monique, we have Amber, we have Richard. They're all equally important to the story and reflect so many children and individuals who get left out of the narrative. So many kids and students who don't get to be the stars or the protagonists of stories. Students like the ones here, who made my very first ever career day, and so many more, and so many I hope to come, so special. Mirrors, windows, sliding doors. That's what we hope twins will be for someone, whether they're a kid or an adult. Now, in terms of illustrating the book, it was very tedious, and Varian touched on that a lot. Graphic novels are a lot of work, and they force you to approach writing and sequential images in a much, much different way. You have the script, and then you have thumbnails, and then you have pencils, and you have lettering, and you have flats, and you have coloring, and blah, blah, blah. On top of all of the edits in between those processes. And if you're working with someone, it's a partnership. It's a true collaboration, and graphic novels need to be acknowledged as such. You are working side by side, creating and building a story. And most importantly, they are a marathon, not a sprint. Believe me. And as partners, we trusted one another to put in the time and research to make this world very much alive and lived in, such as capturing the feeling of your first day of middle school and any school and stuff like that. That feeling of the mall, or a food court, a lunchroom, a very loud lunchroom buzzing with students, or a dispute with your best friend. Twins is a love letter to Black families, much like my own, and to the communities that raise, shape, and change us. But for me, Twins is ultimately a love letter to a little girl, this little girl right here, who hasn't been able to put down her drawing pencil since the age of 4. A little girl who devoured books, but could see she wasn't the star in hardly any of them. And in creating Twins, I thought about a little girl who had a tool and wanted to change all that.
So I hope you guys are just excited for Twins as we are. Be on the lookout for it. It's coming to bookshelves, libraries, bookstores in fall, October 6th, 2020. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Varian and Shannon. That was truly wonderful. I also want to say Twins is part of a series, so look out for more Twins to come, which is very exciting. Thank you, Bryan, Barbara, Ed, Tami. All of you were phenomenal. This was an amazing, amazing event, and I feel so uplifted by all of your stories and that we still have these great stories to connect us all. Thank you for tuning in today. We couldn't serve our purpose without your support, librarians, educators. We hope these books remind you of your strength and the incredible power of books to heal, to comfort, and to connect. And thank you so much. Everyone wave.
Bye-bye.